Today I want to talk to you guys about what I'm calling the Celestion Vintage 30 scandal, for lack of a better term. For a long time now, the Celestion Vintage 30 has been regarded as the holy grail for metal guitar tones. But a few years ago, I went out and bought a brand new guitar cab with vintage 30s in it, thinking that that was going to be the solution to my tone problems. But no matter what I did to it, that cab never sounded quite right. Didn't matter what amp I put through it, what mic I put on it, it never quite sounded the way I expected it to sound. Then a little while ago, Glenn Fricker put out a video claiming that the 2022 model of the Vintage 30 is actually sounding a lot better than they were from about 2006 to 2020. He showed in that video that not only is there a massive sonic difference between the mid-2000s to late 2010s versions and the new versions that are coming out now, but there's also a physical difference that you can actually see in the dust cap on the speaker. So I needed to find out for myself if there was in fact a massive difference in these new Vintage 30s. So to test this out, I obviously need to make sure that as many things as possible are the exact same. The idea here is that the only thing changing is going to be the speaker itself. So we're using a pre-recorded guitar track, we're reamping that guitar into both the old speaker and the new speaker. Now you'll see, I have the cab set up here, I have a few mics set up. The idea here is for the mics to not move at all. Obviously the cab will have to move so I can swap out the speaker, but the mics should be staying in the same place. But just in case, I marked the floor with tape to see exactly where the mic stands are sitting, as well as where the cab is sitting, so I can put the cab back in the exact same spot. Obviously the speaker that's currently being mic'd up is going to be the one that we're swapping out, and in addition to making sure the position of the mics and the cabs are exactly the same, we're also making sure that all of the settings on the pedals and the amplifier and the preamp are exactly the same. So I took the cab, I opened it up, I swapped out the speakers. Now you'll see here that I'm actually taking out two of the speakers. One of these speakers is actually going to be replaced by a different speaker. I'm going to replace that with a Hesu Demon. I'll make a completely separate video on the Hesu Demon another time. Right now we're just focusing on the new Vintage 30, but I figured while the cab was open, I might as well swap that one out too. So you'll see I put the new Vintage 30 exactly in the same slot where the old one was for where the mics were, made sure it was oriented the same way, closed the cabinet back up. I made sure to put the cab back in the exact same spot. Again, that's what the tape on the floor was for. So the mics should be in the exact same position as they were for the old Vintage 30. None of the settings on the guitar pedals were changed. None of the settings on the guitar amp were changed. None of the settings on the microphone preamp were changed. Everything should be exactly the same. The only thing that has been changed is the speaker in the cabinet. Now, when I was in the process of swapping out these speakers, I made the mistake of not getting a close-up shot of the date code on both the old and the new speaker. But you can see here, this is the old speaker that was removed from the cabinet. The date code on that says that it was made in December of 2018. And then obviously the new speaker is currently inside the cabinet, so I can't check the date code on the speaker itself without opening it up again. But this is the box that the new speaker came in, and you can see the date code on there. This was made in February of 2022. So let's check out what these two speakers sound like. So I have two sets of tracks here. These are for the old Vintage 30. It was a double track guitar, so we have a 57 left, 57 right, and the 421 left, 421 right. And same thing with the new speaker, 57 left, 57 right, 421 left, 421 right. So first things first, let's hear what just the old Vintage 30 sounds like on its own. There's no processing on it currently. This is just what that speaker sounds like coming through these mics. Now at first it might not sound super terrible, but there's just this nasty, grindy upper mid-range thing that sounds awful. Like I always say, it sounds like fried assholes. Like it sounds really bad. And when we listen to the new Vintage 30, that's just gone. Now at first the new Vintage 30 kind of sounds weird. Our brain kind of tricks us into thinking that it actually sounds worse at first because humans' hearing is really focused in the upper mids in like the 2.5 to 5K range. So when we have so much less upper mid-range information compared to the first one, it almost sounds worse. But realistically, if you listen to it just overall, it sounds much smoother, much more balanced, and it doesn't sound painful like the old one does. So one more time, the old one on its own. I think it's really apparent to me that the new one sounds just so much better overall. But let's hear what it sounds like in the mix. We're going to start with the old one, then we're going to switch to the new one. The new one just sounds so much better, but I can also hear that there's a resonant frequency in the new ones that I would like to take out. So we're going to throw a little bit of EQ on there. And so that's going to take out the resonant frequency in the new speaker. But even with the old speaker, like, the problems there are not something you can EQ out. We're going to throw this EQ on the old speaker. That was a frequency that was really bothering me in that. But even with that, it's not helping. So this is the old speaker with that EQ move on it. It's a little better than it was, but it's still really bad. Then the new one with a similar EQ move on it. Especially when I go from the new one to the old one, like, the old one just sounds so bad. So there you go, guys. I think that's definitive proof that the most recent years of Vintage 30s sound way better than the stuff we were getting from the mid-2000s all the way up to the late 2010s. Now, what has Celestion said about this? So Celestion as a company has pretty much outright denied that there were any problems with the Vintage 30s at any point. They keep insisting that they've always been made exactly the same. There's no difference. It's the same speaker. And like, we could clearly hear there that there is a massive difference in sound. So the fact that they're denying this is honestly just, I think they just have no good plan in place to deal with the PR outrage that would come along with this. So they're just choosing to deny that it's a thing instead. But we can all hear there's clearly a very big difference. So I want to talk about the customer service side of this a bit, because like, obviously I understand that as a company, Celestion could not afford to like replace everybody's speakers with better ones, because like they would absolutely go bankrupt. Like, that's not even close to an option. But just, it pisses me off as a consumer, because I spent $1,200 a few years ago on an Orange 4x12, and I'm not blaming Orange for this, because obviously they were just using the same model of speakers they had been using. It's not Orange Amplification's fault that they were sent a bad batch of speakers. But like, just in general, I spent $1,200 on that Orange cab, and it's always sounded terrible. So now, to the point that now I am gonna have to buy all new speakers for that cab, and that's gonna come out to about $700. So basically, at the end of the day here, I'm paying $2,000 for a $1,200 cab. Like, that's outrageous. It's not fair. It sucks, and there's unfortunately nothing I can do about it but bitch about it on the internet. But like, I don't know, man. I wish that Celestion would at least own up to their mistake. Like, obviously they can't make it right at this point. Like, just from a financial perspective, I get it. Like, they could not afford to replace all the shitty speakers in all the cabs that they put out for, 15 years that had the bad batches of speakers in them. But like, the fact that they're just outright refusing to admit that this was a problem is, honestly, it's pathetic. It's really, really sad. Like, at least own up to your mistake. Even if you can't retroactively fix it, at least admit that the mistake was made. Like, take some responsibility for what you put so many people through. Because literally, I spent years. I bought that cab probably 4 years ago, and it took me 4 years of fighting with it, trying to get good guitar tones out of it when it just straight up wasn't possible because of the shit speakers in it. And of course, I didn't think the speakers were the problem because, of course, Celestion Vintage 30s have been regarded as the holy grail for metal guitar tone for decades at this point. So, like, how could it possibly be the speakers? But it was. Every single speaker, it's not like there was one bad speaker in it. Every speaker in that cab sounds just as bad as the one that I took out of it. Like, I don't know. It's really disappointing. It's really frustrating. They could at least do us the courtesy of admitting that they fucked up.